It's 9:10 on the 13th of May, 2022. Good evening, good morning. Hello, everyone. Hello, Jen.
Hello.
All right. So this week we are going to be talking about the food crisis, global food crisis that is coming, that is here. Temperature in India. It's very hot in India. There's a climate sort of iteration of the climate crisis, with extreme temperatures in India. North Korea has reported its first COVID case. Ukraine, we're going to give an update on the Ukraine situation in the front line, update a map detailing what's going on in Luhansk specifically. We've got a great map from Defense Politics Asia. And also we're going to talk about Snake Island, the recent assault on Snake Island and what happened there. A Palestinian journalist, a prominent Palestinian journalist who worked for Al Jazeera, has been killed in Palestine. We'll be talking about this. Then moving on to some diplomatic news, Sweden and Finland are potentially going to join NATO. There were lots of meetings this week between Assad and Iran, Macron and Xi, Macron and Putin. If not meetings, phone calls, but lots of diplomatic stuff going on. And also a statement from the Mexican president asking that Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela be allowed to join the Organization of the Americas, the Union of the Americas. And we'll be talking about that too. So I think the first thing we're going to talk about is the food crisis. So a global food crisis that the World Food Organization, World Food Program has said, basically the UN.
Yeah, the United Nations stated that. It's quite obvious. We've been talking about that on the show for quite a while now, right? The Russia and Ukraine being the two largest exporter of wheat and corn. Well, you see, this situation is compounded by the situation in India. India, the past few weeks, is the in general.
Oh. Hello, Jen. Sorry, I lost you a moment. I think.
Yeah, I understand. It's probably something with the electricity in my neighborhood. It's been quite unstable, so it's not something I can help.
Okay.
I can see the street being strange.
Was that your end? Or just
so as I was saying.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, this is unfortunate. So as I was saying, we have a situation on our hands where India is in fact the third largest exporter of wheat as well, which this kind of brings in problems because the temperature in India has broken records of all times. It's simply the highest temperature it has ever been, ever since there were recordings of temperature. Right. So it has went beyond the 45 degrees Celsius, and which would be 120 plus degrees Fahrenheit for the American audience.
Yes, 120.
Yeah. Like schools in India has been dismissed just for children to seek shelters to stay cool.
Right.
To not die of heat stroke. That's how bad it is.
Sure.
And since like right now is the time of the year where it's right before harvest, or is about to is in harvest, depending on where you are in the world, right?
Right.
If the temperature is this hot, then it's simply going to destroy harvest this year.
Yeah.
Which this is just absolutely terrible beyond imagination. The first, second, and the third largest exporter of wheat is now very likely to unable to export not even a single grain of food. And we also have the fertilizer prices around the world, and also oil gas prices rising, which means that any kind of mechanized farming that's not done like by hand and animal labor is also going to be going up, along with all transportation costs. Yeah, it's just we are entering essentially a vicious cycle of scarcity.
Right. I mean, I think the things of you've already mentioned the temperatures, right? So it's a record. It was 51 degrees Celsius in Rajasthan, 123 degrees Fahrenheit if you're American. It was the second day in a row the town experienced these kinds of temperatures. But if you look at the map here, if you can see, I assume you can see that there, Jen. Across the country, you're at 36, 37, 90, 97 if you're American. These are all super hot, and I don't even know. I guess they're not even measuring up here on the border with Pakistan. It seems to be even hotter over there. But I think that the other thing to add to this is that there already is a drought in India. So there's a drought crisis. And if you look at some of these images from CNN here, it's not looking good at all. And cattle, dried up rivers.
Yeah, and countries like Sri Lanka is already right south of India, right? That little island south of India, Sri Lanka, is already, as we've mentioned before, economic crisis, food crisis, oil crisis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is only going to continue to happen more and more as time goes on.
And this people will die from this. I mean, so. A heat wave in 2015, more than 2,500 people died during that summer. So I think that this will probably lead to a higher death rate, which is really terrible. But just on the global food thing, I think just to give the statistic, 193 million people are currently facing acute food insecurity and require urgent life-saving food assistance. So that's from the UN, right? Just wanted to add that in the 53 countries are in some form of food insecurity or perhaps at crisis levels. This is pretty grim. And I think also, as you mentioned, this is not with the fact that the Ukrainian conflict has had the effect that it will have on the food market. So the global food market has not felt the full effect of that. So those grain exports, the fertilizer exports, as you already mentioned, that's not even taken effect yet. So we're already in 53 countries.
So, like today's episode, essentially, we will explain, the world has shown us in real time how the relation between what Marx talked about, foundation, material foundation, and conceptual superstructure, how that works essentially. So, as we keep going to foundation, food is in trouble. Water, as you said, there are droughts and the floods all over the world, right? A few weeks ago was the flood in South Africa that killed many. And then energy is, in crisis as with oil. So with food, water, energy, those three fundamental things in crisis, then the economy itself, of course, is also going to be in crisis, right? So the United States, the Federal Reserve of the United States is, increasing its interest once again to try to combat inflation, which was of a record high, right? And the first quarter of the U.S. Economy was in decline for the first time in however many years, as we were talking about. Just as a country that's closely tied to it, UK, the United Kingdom, whilst the essentially in the elections, the pro-independence party for Scotland has become elected in, has become the largest party in the region. Well, the inflation in the United Kingdom has also reached 10%, as we can see. So, this is it's not good. The crisis of finance capital-centric global imperialism is just in full effect, right? I've spoken to friends who are living in the UK, and they're telling me that food and the rent and utility prices are also going up, so much so that they have to move to another more affordable region to live recently. But Richard, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, so I'm just going to add the statistics here. So you already said 10%, right? So the Bank of England the central bank or the federal bank of the UK is expecting that it will hit 10% by the end of 2022. So we're not quite there yet, but it's expected. And also that the UK is heading for a recession. So, and the US, you already have that being widely like circulated that a recession in the US is coming. Reuters, we already mentioned this many times, Reuters did a poll of prominent economists and said the US is heading for recession most likely. And this is the same for the UK, it seems. So it's a global phenomenon. So the recession thing, that's two large economies, that's the US and the UK now, potentially heading for recession. And also high inflation. So yeah, the high inflation is everywhere, right? So it's also in Europe.
Yes.
The US, as we've mentioned many times. Again, I think what I want to say to this one is, I think this one is a bit more tied to the conflict right now. The price of oil has gone up.
Yes.
So that does have a direct impact on food prices. Let me want to see here. Let's see.
For sure.
So, but this is another thing to say here. So this is said by Andrew Goodwin, right, the chief UK economist with Oxford Economics. He says the UK probably has more inflationary pain to come than most other countries because the impact of the post-Russian invasion is yet to filter through to consumer prices. So this is a 10% inflation without the actual effect of oil conflict on prices. So it will be higher, whatever, like 15%, 12%. I don't know. I mean, you're talking about very high for modern, like developed economies. The big economies, to hit 10% is very unusual.
So there are a few things on that. Mainly is that even the Chinese economy is struggling, and why I bring up China is that inflation means there is too much currency, but not enough goods, right, in the market, so that there where it used to be $3 for a piece of item, now it's $6, right? That's inflation. Also, where does goods come from? Where does commodity production of the world come from? Well, it comes from China, right? But China is, under lockdown and trying to do all of these things to stamp out, COVID, to adhere to zero COVID, because COVID really is the spark that has lit up the powder keg of this globalized, finance-centric commodity economy, right? And so, of course, if you don't have the goods coming out of China to 1-for-1 match the amount of money you have flowing around in your market, then that's inflation, right?
Yeah. Definitely. I think what I wanted to say to this, what I want to add to this is, we've already said that the Russian conflict, the Ukraine conflict, has not added to the inflation. And then secondly, you're talking about COVID. So the reason we have this inflation is because of COVID. So it's in classical sort of textbook economics, you have two reasons for inflation, right? Cost pull and demand, cost push and demand pull. So just on a sort of, on that level, we're talking about cost push. So the cost of production has gone up because of COVID. So people have to put masks on and pay for like more staff to man testing and do all sorts of stuff. But the other thing that is also not incorporated into this 10% inflation rate is the fact that, as you said, Chinese production is like fundamental to global prices. So how what's happening in China will affect the cost of production, the cost of prices. So it will affect prices. And Shanghai has had this lockdown for like 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I don't think that cost has been factored into and has entered into the market in terms of the goods that got coming to the UK. So again, there's like two factors that have not been factored into like how this inflation might actually still get worse globally, not just to the UK, but everywhere, Europe and the US too.
Speaking of COVID, since it is the trigger, right, to all of this, and it itself packs a lot of severe consequences to society and individuals, as we discussed before. So as far as Shanghai goes, from what I've heard from my friends and family, is that the lockdown is gradually started to be opening up in Shanghai now. Where because the COVID number has been going down to like right now it's at almost zero. The only reason that the lockdown is still there is that they fear that they're concerned that since it's spreading, it's possible for it to still spread to all the kind of neighboring regions of China, right? Even though like for China itself, for a few days in a row now. For Shanghai itself, a few days in a row now, the number has reached zero for most places. But the concerning news is that, DPRK, North Korea, which has always held a kind of perfect zero COVID record, right? Is now it has experienced its mass amounts of fever. And then its first wave of COVID. And this is the timing of it, rather, I would say, is tremendously suspicious. Which is that South Korea has just elected an ultra-conservative president that is ultra-friendly to Japan and the United States. Last week, South Korea has just integrated itself to the electronic digital information command system of NATO, right? And South Korean, the new South Korean is essentially illegitimate regime. South Korea has never been a legitimate regime. Has called for the stationing of American strategic nuclear submarines and bombers in South Korea as a kind of both as to protect, to use Americans as hostage, American equipment as hostage, so that when North Korea's new advanced long-range firepower fires at them, the Americans will have to defend their assets, and therefore, by extension, defend them. And also to just be more aggressive and anti-communist against China, DPRK in general, right? So immediately then we saw this, essentially days after South Korea has been integrated into NATO information command system. Not to mention, the long history of CIA and just the West in general conducting biological operations in the DPRK, right? So there were tales from the Korean War of, the mysterious lice and ants and rats seen in like the middle of winter, right? Where these creatures naturally don't like to come out because it's cold. Just common sense tells you that. And then, there was this very famous case of a Western POW who was caught by the People's Volunteer Army, the Chinese reinforcements to the DPRK, basically denying, when our kind of commissars told him that, your country is conducting biological warfare against us. And then in the middle of winter, as, they were marching the POWs to the POW camps in the rear lines, they saw trails of ants, on the ground in the middle of winter.
Right.
So the guy didn't believe it. He was like, okay, I'll prove it to you. He picked one up and just ate it. The guy had diarrheas for the next 3 days, 72 hours. That doesn't happen when you eat an ant in the middle of the winter that doesn't have biological agents in it. And afterwards, the guy understood that yes, this is biological warfare, and that he became a anti-imperialist activist ever since.
Where was this? Sorry, was this recently?
During the Korean War.
I was just checking. Okay, sorry, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So when you have a record of that, just consistently, then and especially combined with the timing, we would say that it's rather suspicious how COVID even ended up in North Korea in the first place to begin with.
I mean, I do think that it was inevitably going to come to the country if they hadn't reported any cases, if they were fortunate enough to have repelled it for so long.
They had no traffic with South Korea. The only possible way is if
From China.
Okay, like due to being like the same language, same culture,
Yeah,
obviously both sides have agents on the other side, right? Well, all you need
Yeah,
to do is just like get a COVID patient to sneeze in a bottle and then just like put it in a room while you're talking to somebody else, and then like there you go. Like it's
yeah. I mean, the only other place. I mean, you do have there's cargo trains that are coming. So I think recently, so the country's been closed for 2 years
no.
because of COVID.
DPRK ever since 2020, when COVID started, has
They were closed.
confirmed to ban and just stop,
Yeah,
seize all kind of port and border activities of ships, of trains, and of all aircrafts. Just
right.
completely.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
they
even more
closed for 2
suspicious.
years. But I mean, I think they do have rail. So they did open up rail, only cargo rail with China recently. So for the last 2
Yes,
years,
but anytime COVID number would be on the rise, they would shut it off. It's happened like 3 or 4 times now ever since 2020, all the way
yeah,
till today.
yeah. Right. I mean, I just hope that they'll be able to contain it, and they can have a robust system to
They
track.
should be able to do it. Yeah. Well, I mean,
Okay.
DPRK is a very militant nation who has strong organizational discipline and knows how to disinfect things. Because all you need for that is bleach, people. You just need electricity and water. That's all you need to manufacture bleach.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Yeah, I think at least they've got at least a strong state that can intervene and have like hands-on
Yeah.
approach rather than just laissez-faire and just herd immunity and mass death as we've seen elsewhere. But okay, let's talk about so that's Korea and the coronavirus situation there. I guess we need to move on to Ukraine. We want to talk about the Ukraine update, right?
Yes.
Just to remember that. Okay, so
Yeah.
I've got a great resource which I'm gonna give a shout out to someone. 1 second.
Yes.
So I, as you know, with this show, we've been covering the Ukraine situation for I don't know whatever it is, 2 months now, 75 days since it started, and we've looked at various maps. There's lots of maps you can find online, live.au and Institute for War, and they're all okay, like they're pretty good. But the best one, in my opinion, the best source on this is from Defense Politics Asia. So I'm going to show you their map right now. So they have their own YouTube channel. I'm giving them a shout out.
Yeah.
They have a daily update where they tell you the guy that he's from Singapore.
I'm in their Discord server.
And the Discord server and all sorts of stuff. So you have an update from them daily, and they have this map which is updated all the time. And you can also, take a look at the war as it's progressed over time. But I'll give a quick update because I've been watching all of their stuff this week and covering and just seeing what they've been talking about, what's happening in the war. So without going into like the minute detail that channel goes on to, I'll just give you a general thing. So starting from the top here, Kharkov. So it's they like to call it the happy front for the Ukrainians. So the Russians have been pulling back quite quickly. I mean, some people have been calling it a rout, but I don't know if that's correct. It's just a way of describing it. But they have been pulling back to the border. So obviously Belgorod and the Russian border is right here. So the Russian forces have been pulling back from Kharkov, and Ukrainians have been able to push forward. I mean, just on a comment sort of for this, it's the border right here. So it's quite smart, I think, if they force the Ukrainians to push all the way to the border and they can leave these troops here, the Ukrainians then need to advance into Russia and then are formally invading Russia, which changes the narrative a lot for Putin. And then I assume can actually legally mean that they can use mobilization. So, I mean, sure, they're losing ground on Kharkov, but I mean, they're only a few kilometers.
I just want to comment that
Go ahead.
the more Russia can draw the Ukrainian troops out of static positions into maneuver warfare, where the Ukrainian troops also have to like drive vehicles to pursuit or to do anything, or to flank or what have you, the better it's going to be for Russia. Because if like think about it, if a guy simply like gets inside a concrete building, shuts all the doors and windows, just stays inside, have a gun point at the only direction that can come in, right? It's very hard to deal with that. But if a person has to run out in the field, then all of a sudden it's like extremely convenient for you to be able to deal with that.
Right. And also I think if you're fighting purely defensively in Kharkov, as you said, in dug-in positions with concrete buildings, with bunkers and stuff, I mean, if you just use like the standard like numbers you need is usually 3-1. So if you're trying to take something, you usually have 3-1.
Yeah.
So you have three soldiers.
And American kind of wargaming exercises has shown that even like veterans, right, in offense against like completely inexperienced college students, right, with like just an AK or something, in these kind of complex building scenarios, the ratio of the casualty ratio of wounded and killed is still 1-1 between like experienced U.S. Marine and airborne versus just like a guy behind a couch with a gun poking out the top.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah.
So I mean, the Russians are pulling back. I think that from the Western perspective, they'll say this is a great victory. This is a sign of Russian failure, of Russian this and Russian that. I guess that's how they'll paint it. So I'll move on to the Luhansk front. So if you look over here, you've got the border, right? So, 1 second. This is this gray line over here. 1 second, just loading. Okay, so you can see that long gray line that goes sort of from the top to the bottom there when I'm showing my cursor. I assume you can see that, right, Jen? Is that clear to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, that's the administrative border of Luhansk. So if you look at Luhansk, almost all of Luhansk is in LPR and with Russian forces in it. So they've taken almost the entirety of Luhansk is taken.
Hello? Have we lost Richard? Well, shoot. This is... because, like, the reason is because Richard lives in China, and in order to do this, he has to use a VPN. And so, the VPN browser server, has to refresh every now and then, and therefore it's just difficult for him as well in general. So, Richard, are you back? Are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
cool. Let's keep going.
It was actually Firefox. It wasn't the VPN. Just Firefox just completely crashed. So, I mean, I do have lots of tabs open, so I don't blame Firefox. Nonetheless, I'll carry on. Where did you lose me?
Okay.
Just explaining Luhansk, right?
Well, you were explaining the how the most of the Luhansk administrative line with that railroad is already in DPR, LPR, Russian forces' hands, and then your thing froze, and I had to check the stream.
I'll carry on from there then.
Well, actually, frozen. If it was just me,
No, fine. Okay, cool. So so almost all of Luhansk is in Luhansk LPR hands and Russian hands. So the only thing left that the Ukrainians have is a place called Severodonetsk over here. And they're fighting over this, right? So there's fighting right now over this position. And then there's been like the Russians and LPR forces have been crossing this river like pontoon bridge style. And basically they're fighting over this particular piece of ground here. This is a old mine dump, as I understand it. And it's like high ground. And if you take this, you then have like eyes on for artillery and fire support onto this road, the only major road that leads into Severodonetsk. So and Lysychansk. Excuse my pronunciation. That's the best I can do. But they are almost about.
There's a running joke in the American military.
Wait, 1 second to finish the point there. So is that once they take this, that means there's no supplies coming in, and you can already see the pincer movement sort of coming around, the sort of classic Soviet doctrine pincer coming around, the encirclement. The south one is not as the movement is not as fast, but the north one is there's a lot of pressure. Sorry, go ahead, Jen. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Well, there's a running joke in the U.S. military, which is that everything that the Russians make can swim. Because the Soviet doctrine is built for the European front from European from Siberia all the way to Western Europe, where there is a lot of rivers and just this kind of places of water, right? All its vehicles need to be able to do river crossing with a minimum preparation. So yeah, this is if you were to use NATO equipment on this front. So yeah, literally look at the map. All the rivers, right? And look how every single every few tens of kilometers, there's a river of some body of water of some sorts. Yeah, if you're going to use Western battle tanks, yeah, good luck.
Yeah. So just out on this one, these blue icons here for this map. So if you are going to look at this map, I do recommend it. This is a great map. These are, the guy has literally gone and by hand, gone on Google Images and found entrenchments and emplacements that were dug by the Ukrainians all before February. So there's a caveat that this is all imagery before February because Google hasn't released any imagery
timeline, right?
Conflict. So, but bear in mind, look at that. It shows you where the Ukrainians dug in. So if you want to use that kind of reference, you could say this is kind of like the Ukrainians' Maginot Line. This is their line of deep entrenchments where they hope.
And we've seen defense policy we've used here on this show, even back when we were using the stupid Be Live platform. Some images that were originally made by Defense Politics Asia. So shout out.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, and then just one more thing then for the Ukraine situation is there was, oh my gosh, so much to discuss with this, but we'll have to try and give a summary. So Snake Island, if you remember at the start of the conflict, Snake Island was the famous island where, Russian warship, go fuck yourself or go to hell. Excuse my French.
Idi Nahui, right?
Right.
One of the few Russian curse words that I understand due to years of video games.
Right. So this is the island that was taken by the Russians, but apparently, remember, the Coast Guard soldiers that were stationed here were murdered by the Russians, and then it actually turned out that they surrendered, but they'd already been given the highest honor of the country. They'd already been given medals. And it was a bit, and the BBC and all of Western media sort of lapped up this story as if it was true, and it turned out the guys had surrendered, so they had not been as heroic as depicted by the Ukrainian propaganda.
They were surrendered and they were treated well. They were not all mowed down as the fake news.
They were treated well and they surrendered. So it kind of broke two of the propaganda pieces. One, that the Russians are brutal, and true that, and the second point being that Ukrainian soldiers are immortal, brave heroes. All of them.
Right.
So anyway, for the 9th of May, now there's obviously a lot of competing ways of how this is being depicted.
Yeah.
So on the 9th of May, because of it being Victory Day and Putin having to make a speech, this is at least the Russian account of it, was that the Ukrainians tried to take Snake Island and, they were repelled. So the numbers from the Russians are there's some pretty big numbers. So they shot down, I think it's 3 Su-27s and 2 Su-25s, 3 Mi-8s and 1 Mi-24. So 4 helicopters, 5 planes, jets, and then a number of
pretty significant.
Yeah. And then about 50 paratroopers. They say 50 paratroopers, elite commando, sort of paratrooper, special forces, basically were killed too, and they didn't take the island. The Ukrainians say that no, it was the Russians who were hit. Let me also add this. Also said they shot down a number of drones, BR-2 drones, the Turkish drones.
The Turkish drones. That's right.
Right. I think if you watch Defense Politics Asia, you'll see that the Ukrainians claim that they showed footage from a BRT drone of an Mi-8 helicopter landing on Snake Island that then gets blown up. So the problem with the footage is that the Russians and Ukrainians both use the same helicopters, and if it's a nighttime infrared feed, you can't see a uniform or anything that you just see a guy.
Right, or the insignia.
Right, but if you watch the footage, you'll see that they don't land on the helipad. So there's a helipad on this island. So bear in mind the Russians have already taken the island. So there's footage of a nighttime landing. They believe it's on this side of the island, and then it's blown up. So Defense Politics Asia's argument is that, well, there's a helipad over here. Why would you land in a field? in like they don't even land properly. They do it. They jump out the helicopter and drop boxes.
And like it's like think like paratrooper kind of insertion, commando insertion kind of thing. So if you are defending the position, then why would you need to insertion, right?
Exactly.
So then it brings in the question: if you're defending an island, the only case that you would be using helicopters is to evacuate people. So then it should be going from the helipad, taking off with people running in and moving away, right? If it was a Russian helicopter, because Russia has taken the island, like you said. And so this it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And also, like, if you're in terms of defense, especially like something like of a small area, especially a small island, only the size of like a few apartment compounds, you don't need a lot of maneuver equipment. A few like armored vehicles at most. That's all you need. You don't need helicopters. What you do need is some sort of missiles, man-portable missiles. Or if you're talking about more long-range threats, such as warships or fighter jets, as the Ukrainians have sent, then you need things to counter those. But besides that, you don't need to move around too much, because if you move around too much, you move into the water, you move off the island. You don't need that. If you're talking about if you want to destroy like torpedo boats, you can just like fire shoulder-launched anti-tank Concorde missiles off the island if you're the Russians. Or you could just like have like a attack helicopter from like way back. But like whatever it is, you don't need transport helicopters.
Well, actually, let me. I've got the video here, so I'm actually going to play it for us, because there's no point talking about it. We've got it here. So this is the actual footage that the Ukrainians released. So it's only a minute long, so we'll just watch it quickly. So there's your MR8, 8th of May. Okay, so the day before May 9th, Victory Day. There's your chopper. How much? Okay, so there we go. There's the strike. Okay, and then there's the guy.
And boom.
Okay, cool, yeah, there you go. Okay, cool. So I think obviously the strike. I think the rest of the footage is just burning. They don't. Yeah. So, but the thing to note, right, is it's very grainy footage. Apologies, but you'll see that these guys that are jumping out. So the helicopter's not landing.
Well, you can't blame us for the camera equipment they bought from the international market.
Right. So the thing is, these guys are jumping out and then running. There's a guy here you can see is like in a prone position. So apparently, the Russians, they've decided to land on the island that they have already got control
and
over.
Shoot themselves.
Go straight away and shoot. No, and then go. And the Ukrainians say that they shot them, obviously, but and then go into prone, right? So go into prone position. So why would you do that if you have the island? If there's no Ukrainians on the island, why would you go into a prone position? But anyway, so their argument is that it's a BRT footage. The feed is from their drone, but it's very common for your drones to watch your own troops landing anyway, so that you have a live feed of what's going on. Anyway, so that's the Snake Island situation. So it was that was a big PR attempt, apparently, by Ukrainian and with the advice of British and American generals to take Snake Island to insult Putin on Victory Day. That's at least the Russian version of events. And the Ukrainians say that they just blew up a Russian helicopter. That's all they say. They deny everything else.
Yeah.
The other big story then we need to come on to, which we haven't mentioned, which is very important news, is the murder or the killing of the Palestinian is Al Jazeera journalist in Palestine, in the West Bank. So
yeah, they were reporting, right? The journalist and the cameraman, they were both shot by Israeli forces. The journalist herself was killed, and the cameraman was, wounded, but now in stable conditions in the hospital. They are both work for Al Jazeera, the Qataris news services, right? Al Jazeera is, they are anti-China, but on a lot of things they are rather neutral, right? That's why a lot of Western and just people all over the world audience likes to watch them, because if you can be non-partisan and neutral, some issues, then that's good enough for some
Yeah,
reporting,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's Al Jazeera stations in various cities, especially in Syria, has been blown up by Israeli fighter jets before. And
Yeah, a year ago. A year ago,
ironic
actually.
thing is that they share an office building just with every other media office, because that's pretty normal. Just everybody one in one place, save costs, same equipment, whatever. But Voice of America also uses that office, and Israel just blows it up when this was like from 2 years ago, I believe, 1 or 2 years ago. So it's
No, it
2
was a year
years
ago. It
ago.
was a year ago.
But
It was a year ago. Yeah.
Israel is doing what the Israeli state essentially continuing on its just fascist colonial rampage. Continuing to murder a journalist just like in cold blood like this whilst reporting.
I think this is
There's
another
not
instance.
much excuse for that.
Right. This is another instance where the US has its awkward bedfellows, to put it lightly. We already know the famous story about the journalist who worked for Washington Post, the Saudi journalist who was killed by the Saudis in the Turkish embassy. That was already a very awkward moment for the West, or for the US, who always promotes free media and free press and all these kinds of things. Now we've got their Israeli state, their apartheid state that they pay for, killing journalists, which makes it extremely awkward for them again. But this is just standard practice for the Israeli apartheid forces. Like if you ever watch the film made by Abby Martin, Palestine, what's it called?
Empire.
I forgot the name of the film, but
Gaza is burning or something.
Gaza burning, Gaza on fire, something like that. But she documents her
Gaza
team
on fire. Yes,
Gaza. 100 civilians, unarmed civilians. Some of them are even paramedics. Some of the journalists. Some of them are children. There's a guy in a wheelchair. We're all shot.
They had the vest press PRESS on them.
Yeah. So I mean, this is another heinous crime, allegedly. I mean, of course, the Israelis are denying it. They say they want to see the bullet. They say they can't confirm it. I mean, I'm sure they'll pop all sorts of smoke to try and make this difficult to point.
Well, then they're like 2 years later, and they'll come out and say, "Oh, we did it," because that's like
right.
These kinds of things always end up.
Yeah, the Al Jazeera journalists were grilling the current press secretary of the White House. They were saying, sort of, okay, well, are you going to let the Israelis investigate this? And the press secretary said, okay, well, yeah, they're more than capable of investigating themselves, So they were grilling him.
The CIA conducts an investigation on the CIA, which concludes that we have not done any.
The criminals have investigated themselves. They find themselves innocent. It's a joke.
Real good thinking right there.
So anyway, Israel, the apartheid state, being the apartheid state, probably doing the same things. So it's a shame that she's gone. Okay, so the next thing we'll discuss
is diplomacy then.
Let's move on to diplomacy.
Let's start off with Sweden and Finland wanting to join NATO, right?
Right. Sweden and Finland to join NATO. You want to go first?
Sure. I mean, it's the whole Ukrainian conflict started fundamentally because of NATO's ceaseless eastward expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Where so like there was this jokingly this map of how Iranian people see the world, right? And of all the nicknames of the regions and chunks and countries of the world, DPRK was called Anti-Imperialist Missile Launchpad, which whatever. But if you are to join NATO, if you were to ally with America, wherever you are in the world, you are an imperialist missile launchpad. That's what you are. That's literally what you are. So, for Finland and Sweden, mind you, Sweden, ever since the 2016-ish, has been building up its mechanized armored, modernized armored divisions with the best Nordic made infantry fighting vehicles in Leopard 2A5, 2A6, 2A7 battle tanks, etc., etc., etc. And they've been expanding the size of their armed forces as well. They have a fairly solid, at least into structure and bureaucracy. At least in terms of structure and equipment wise, it's a fairly competent force that's been building up for 6+ years now, and the situation in Finland is much the same, right? And Sweden and Finland, in addition to the stuff that NATO does, always host military exercises between the two countries as basically one defense, massive defense zone. I mean, just last week there was pictures of BMP-2s, Finnish BMP-2s and Leopard 2s being transported on trains, right, in Finland, and it was rumored to be Finland sending forces onto the Russian border, but no, it was traveling westwards to do the annual exercise they have with Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for them to do this, yeah, it's not good. I mean, I've already seen some stuff in China about Russia threatening a not special but technical military action to counter this, which I find quite interesting, whatever that could mean.
Right. So just to clarify, Finland is going to join NATO. I think I might have misstated that. It's not. It's no longer up for like. It's not like they might. They are.
Speculation, right?
Yeah. It's been decided. So Finland is joining NATO. Sweden is not yet, but they are. There's a push for it right now. They're discussing it. I mean, bear in mind, it still will take a year or two for them to be formally integrated. It can't just happen overnight. But you mentioned there is already an exercise. So Finland is already doing joint exercises with NATO forces right now as we speak. Yeah, I mean, I think that.
I'd like to just interrupt for one moment. Our viewer, our friend Cancer Box, is saying North Atlantic Terrorist Organization must expand to protect fascism and white supremacy.
Right,
I'll just
exactly.
add one word, everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty good. I'm going to use it. I'm going to steal that one, and we're going to use it from now on.
Right. I think that we'll only all have peace, and we'll only ever be safe once New Zealand has joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or North Atlantic Terrorist Organization. That's the only way that we can have peace and safety in the world is when everyone is a part of NATO, except for Russia and China. Maybe I don't know. That's the only way.
Peace in our times. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a Chamberlain joke.
Right. Okay, peace in our time. Right. So, I think we've already discussed this before. I think in terms of Finland and NATO and Sweden, do you really want to agitate Russia? Like, surely, is this worse than the Cold War? Is that apparently the case? Because Finland was never part of NATO before this point. So apparently Finland thinks that right now Russia is more dangerous and there's more tension.
What the Russians call St. Petersburg, what us communists will forever remain as Leningrad, will... you Aryan terrorist organization, good one. Leningrad will once again be under threat. Finland was like the logistical and heavy lifter behind like what helped to besiege the people of Leningrad and like starve millions of Leningrad Soviet people to death. For like however 100, 200 plus days, however many that siege of Leningrad lasted.
Right.
So it's this is probably I won't say it's going to happen again. But from an operational to strategic level, like that's basically what that is. It might as well happen.
Yeah.
So
I do want to answer. So we had a question from a viewer, a comment. About Sri Lanka, which we didn't have in our schedule, which we should actually have had in our schedule. The things that I do know about Sri Lanka was that they gave an order to shoot at protesters with live ammunition who were, damaging public property or doing whatever that would sanction that. But the rule, the law to fire, live fire to shoot protesters was given this week in Sri Lanka. So the situation there is actually deteriorating, I would say. I know that there was a resignation again. If I'm not mistaken, it was the prime minister resigned. Let me take a look here quickly. Because there's been a new prime minister appointed on the 11th. Let me just check here quickly. They've appointed Gotabaya Rajapaksa. So I'll just share this with you guys so we can discuss it. As the basic, I would call an interim prime minister, right? Or a new prime minister, but with the economic crisis, with the protests going on, I think this is not a permanent role. So who's this guy, Gotabaya Rajapaksa? He is a veteran politician, according to the BBC. Senior opposition. He's and a senior opposition MP as well, was sworn to lead a proposed party government. The move came after the president ignored calls to resign and vowed to restore order in a national address. 9 people have been killed and 200 injured in unrest since his brother resigned as prime minister on Monday. During his nationwide address, Mr. Rajapaksa said he would appoint a new prime minister who commanded the majority of support in parliament, as well as a new cabinet. So the cabinet is still not, it's gone. They all resigned 3 weeks ago. So Mr. Wickremesinghe has been on Sri Lanka's political scene for decades. This will be his 6th stint as prime minister, although he's never seen out a full term. So that's pretty. It's never a good sign when you have people who serve multiple stints as a prime minister and then never actually finish a full term. That is a sign of political instability.
That's right. Oh, good God. Let's hope that the situation. I mean, it's definitely, I would say, in not just China's interest, but the entire ASEAN and RCEP trade bloc's interest to stabilize Sri Lanka. So let's hope that it can be stabilized, because actually, this is a good segue to our final kind of big topic, which is diplomacy, right?
Yeah.
In times of, because foundation and superstructure, in terms of superstructure, as Marx said, it retroactively acts back onto the foundation because it is a dialectic, right? In times of material crises, you must, as a society, no matter at what scale you're talking about, use your conceptions to change conceptions to retroactively stabilize the deteriorating material situation using labor. That's one of the huge reasons why labor, human effort, is such an important thing. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, So then, essentially, if this situation is not stabilized through cooperation and diplomacy of multiple countries, doesn't even necessarily matter what your ideology is. Like, as long as you're for stability and for progress, you should stabilize it now before it expands geometrically, right? 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? To stabilize it now before it gets out of control, so that it becomes a domino effect where the dominoes, one smaller piece of domino of instability and starvation and chaos tips over a bigger piece, and then becomes a chaotic kind of scarcity domino, if you want to call it that, to knock over bigger and bigger piece, until then, the whole world, bites the dust. That is what must be done for the interest of humanity. I don't care what political ideology you are, and this is indeed what we saw happening, right? Essentially, with everybody, with the exception of imperialists, has been making these kinds of calls. So let's start off with the Americas. So every year around June, early to mid-June, I believe, it happens in June. There is this summit of the Americas that happens in Los Angeles, United States, where all the countries of North and South America, mainly South America, meets up and talks. It's a summit, right? They talk. So then, historically, the 3 socialist places, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. have always been excluded from this, and so it is no different this year. But the president of Mexico has visited Cuba and deliberately, openly said on open air that no nation, no American, like the continent America, nation should be excluded from economic this kind of like trade zone kind of deal. Yeah, because if you don't have fundamentally, right, if you run out of a really critical item, a fundamental commodity such as food or energy or water in one place, okay, maybe less so water, you need to be able to buy it from somewhere else. You need to be immediately be able to replace your supplier, the supply chain, to another backup option that is available to you, so that your people doesn't feel any effect. And people like feeling effect means starving. That's what that means. So then, if everyone can do this, then yeah, like that's a good thing. This is the validity behind, like why there should be a global economy, why autarky, which is I produce everything that I will ever need, like why it doesn't quite work, right? Even socialism, even under socialism, there's still like economic trade blocks. Yeah.
Sure.
So that's the first thing. And then the whole RCEP in Asia is supposed to be that, and hopefully that's why I say like hopefully the entire RCEP zone can do something. Which so under this kind of situation, we're seeing like essentially every country politically and economically doing exactly what I was describing, switching its partners in a more so that both political and material access is more readily available to keep the whole thing going, right? So then what we're seeing is so first we have Syrian President Assad Bashar talking to Iranian leaders, basically stating that they will resist American imperialism together, and therefore peace and stabilize the situation so that there can be development, which is obviously needed because all the infrastructure of Syria was destroyed in the U.S.-Turkey caused civil war that needs to be replaced by things like construction contractors, people to lay down pipelines, sewage to get bulldozers to get rid of rubble. That's the kind of stuff you need in Syria. Not more guns, not more bombs.
Right.
And
then we've also got a meeting between Macron and Xi as well.
Yeah, Macron is very interesting, right? He kind of represents the other side of Europe's interest. So on the one hand, Europe is finance capital, global imperialism, colonizing the people of Africa, Eastern Europe, and all over the world, right? France still has a colony in South America. Case in point. But on the other hand, Europe is also has a kind of role as an indigenous civilization, because French people came from the Frank people of France, and there is like the indigenous Germanic people, and for all various places in Europe. So Macron kind of represents that like continental side of Europe, where its interest is clearly more based in things that a lot of other indigenous countries, such as China, wants, which is stability, good economy, and growth, and development. Right. So this has made Macron, so like he just got reelected president, right? And first, one of the major diplomatic phone calls, as you do, when you get elected president, you call or you ring up all the important partners to work out like what like your presidency is going to be like, what concerning them. whoever they are, like which country it is. So, who did he call? President Xi Jinping, China. So essentially, this combined day has already 20 times now. Each one of them is like minimum of like 3 hours, upwards of 9 hours of a phone call, and nobody knows what they said. Russia released like a very little transcript. France just straight up doesn't release a transcript of a call ever. Yeah, so like this has made your EU liberal finance capital imperialists, really the left wing of imperialism people, really, really suspicious of Macron, right? So, well, yeah, it's an interesting situation where you see nations who have kind of this desire for like being indigenous, being stable in your own like home, basically immediately are able to be fairly rational and work out the beginnings to what is a new economic and a political zone coexistence and or alliance with one another in this kind of crises where there is decreasing demand and decreasing supply simultaneously, right, of all sorts of commodities right now, which is primarily food and energy.
Yeah. I think on Macron, he's just been re-elected. Sorry, Angela Merkel has only recently stepped out. So I think if you consider his role over the last the 2 terms that he had, he and her were kind of seen as this sort of European power couple, if you want to use that terminology. I do that. And if you consider his role in the early parts in February, before the conflict kicked off in Ukraine, he was shuttling around to Turkey, to Russia, to Ukraine, to everywhere to try and be this sort of global statesman. So I do think that this is how he wants to be seen, is as a global statesman. So phone calls to Xi, phone calls to Putin, phone calls to Zelensky. I think he is trying to sort of create that image of himself and also place France in that place. I think that within the EU, you do have that competing relationship between France and Germany. Now that the UK is out, those are the 2 dominant, sort of states and financial centers and sort of economies in the EU. So I think he's trying to sort of carve out and secure that position. I mean, there's nothing particularly also surprising. I mean, a phone call to Xi, they want to maintain trade, they want to maintain, investment, bilateral stuff. And then I think he in all fairness, he is, France is still an imperialist country. It controls the monetary system of Western Africa. The franc is still pretty much in the hands of the French, and they still inadvertently, if you think about Burkina Faso, like, the murder of Thomas Sankara, the French, most definitely French intelligence and French, security services definitely, I've no doubt, played some role in that. But all these things aside, I guess Macron has played an important role in being able to try and be a bridge between the West and Russia, which I suppose if we don't want this conflict to go on between Ukraine and Russia, then that is an important thing for peace, I guess. But at the end of the day, it's still an imperialist country, still represents that collective West, as some people refer to it as. I think we have to close now. We've finished, but I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Jen, before we finish.
No, that's it.
Okay, cool. So we'll be back next week, and we'll be covering the same headlines. If you have anything else that you would like us to investigate, to discuss, to bring up, then please comment and just send us a message as well. Okay, we'll have to cover that one next week. Then cancel box. I'm not sure. Assassination attempt in Romania. Okay,
what a name! It's always fun to read that out on stream.
What's that? Sorry, cancel box. Yeah, sure. But okay, we'll be back next week, guys. And please do like if you haven't liked, subscribe, notification bells. Please hit all of that, and we'll be back next week. So we'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.